And problem number 4, you might still get hacked. Yes. Selinux is not an intrusion detection tool. It doesn't replace intrusion detection tools like Snort, for example. And once you've been hacked, there's not much Selinux can do just to stop you, to stop that hacker. Having said that, Selinux can perhaps stop a few common compromises, things like buffer overflows and bits and pieces, and access incorrect directories, this sort of thing in a web server. A really good example of this is, you remember many years ago when you had Apache being able to read files straight off the root file system. Nowadays, Selinux would prevent those sort of vulnerabilities. Some examples of people trying to compromise an application to get onto the system. So if an application, a user mode application, tries to turn Selinux off, tries to exec setting 4.0, denied. Okay? No chance of that happening from a user-allowed application. Confined applications trying to modify the kernel, maybe an attacker wants to install his own custom kernel module, that sort of thing. Denied. Selinux won't allow that to happen, obviously. And confined applications trying to clear log files. Sometimes you've got custom applications which manage their own logs for some reason, and sometimes you might want this to happen. But actually, most applications shouldn't need to clear their own log files. Most applications should just use syslog. There are some applications that misbehave, and like I say, Samba and HTTPD look totally different on the file system. And if you're using nasty programs like Wine or the Windows emulator on Linux, then you'll see that actually there's some really weird stuff on the file system. Its activity is really weird, and can do stuff like mmap 0 or memory mapping 0. But we've got policy in there to allow that sort of thing for applications that need it. You probably want remote logging set up for Selinux. You probably want remote logging set up on any production server anyway. And we're going to come back to this later and tell you how you can allow this. So, how do you manage Selinux in the enterprise? How do you actually use this thing? So how do you configure your remote machines? How do you manage your remote content and keep policy across remote machines? How do we centralize logging? These are not problems that are common just to Linux. This is for any application. Linux does not stand out, it's not difficult, doesn't have its own special rules for doing things like this. So for example, if those of you that are still using the gold build system, if people are still using things like virtual machine templates for their provisioning, then this technique might work for you. If you've made any local customizations to Linux on your gold build, you can actually export them very easily. semanage-o exports only your customizations to the policy into a file like /temp/selinux-mods, your modifications to policy. For example, if your gold build has, I'm going to use web server again, running on a non-standard port, configure it once in your gold build, export the policy, and then stick it into your build system. You can SCP this file around to different machines if that's your way of doing things, and semanage-i to install that module back into the SCP. Okay, so nothing specifically complex here. And semanage can run a bunch of these changes all at the same time. Now, semanage is really slow because it compiles and loads policy. Okay, if you're going to add an exception into your Selinux policy, then it has to recompile policy and take some time. Like my laptop, when I want to change policy, it's like 30 to 40 seconds. It's a pain. You can batch up transactions just using like EOF in your shell, run them all at the same time, and it's going to be a lot faster for you. This is what your Selinux mods file might look like. All your booleans in here, you can see I'm toggling booleans for various different things. Okay, options for distributing Selinux policy modifications. Now, again, I want to get away from this idea that Selinux needs special rules and special considerations. Selinux is just configuration files. So if you use Satellite at the moment for managing your configuration, carry on using Satellite. If you use RPMs with Satellite, carry on using RPMs. I'm sure there's a few Puppet users in the room, people using Puppet. Puppet's got built-in support for doing Linux modifications, as does Ansible as well, incredibly simple. Or you could apply changes with Kickstart. So looking into Satellite, you can run your semanage commands during post-install, either from Kickstart, or if you've got a script that you're deploying Satellite, stick it in there. Have it as part of your common build system. In Rails 7 again, we've referenced that you've got things like SE policy generate, will generate an RPM spec file for your policy. Everyone here, every sysadmin will know how to run an RPM, install an RPM. If you're going to distribute your changes via RPM, carry on doing so. Raise of hands, RPM writers in this room? Handful of hands, okay. This is a spec file for an RPM, and despite there being a whole bunch of code on the screen, actually it's not that complex. At the top, we've got running the command like restorecon, so restore context to files on your system. You've got references to custom policy, also all built into an RPM. So actually, if you're using RPMs at the moment, carry on doing so with your SE Linux policy. If you're a scripter, you like writing custom scripts, if that's your way of managing your enterprise, then there's tools like SE Linux enabled, really simple script that will just output 1, 0, or whatever. So for checking, is SE Linux enabled? Load policy, well, you're not going to get any points for guessing what that command does. But if scripting is your way of doing things, you can add custom scripts in here very easily for checking SE Linux things. Okay. Puppet users in the room? Cool, good. So Puppet, awesome technology. Puppet also has built-in support for SE Linux. If you want to toggle booleans in your production environment, if you want to load custom policy, then use the tools that work for you already, like Puppet. Okay? A lot of Fedora infrastructure is moving now towards Puppet to manage Fedora infrastructure for their build systems, all that kind of stuff. This is a Puppet manifest, Puppet recipe. You can see I've highlighted some bits in green. So for toggling SE Linux booleans, in this example, my web server can do things like, can network connect, can bind to YP, to Yellow Pages, this kind of stuff. My Puppet recipe here as well has different ports for my web server. It has things like connectors, caching directories. But actually writing a Puppet recipe is incredibly simple. Ansible as well, not one that I use too often. Again, I have a little show of hands icon on this one. Ansible users, anyone? Okay, kind of what I thought, handful of people. Ansible, pretty simple, nice, easy to read configuration file syntax. I want to show you again how to use it in another system to manage SE Linux, if it works for you. You can use things like SE manage and load policy, that sort of thing, in your Ansible scripts to just deploy SE Linux around the enterprise. Also, Ansible is being used in Fedora now. If you know that Fedora infrastructure is hundreds and hundreds of servers building RPMs constantly. So it's my show of hands icon. My Ansible configuration might look like this. Again, nice simple configuration file. I've highlighted some things in blue this time. So if I want to change SE booleans from Ansible, really simple to do this sort of thing. Again, take a look through your Ansible. Take a look through the configuration files first. Pretty simple stuff. And of course, if we've got people just deploying by Kickstart, I deploy a lot of my custom virtual machines still by Kickstart, then you can just write the sed scripts that you're familiar with. You can do things like changing from target policy to MLS policy, all from Kickstart. Okay. So again, SE Linux is managed just by configuration files, has no special rules, it's necessary just for SE Linux. Configure it like you would any other application. Some other configuration management systems I've thrown up there. Got things like Pulp, CF Engine, Tivoli, that sort of thing. So, can I ship the same policies in Rail 5 as Rail 6? No. The reason for this is Rail 6 checks for a whole load more things than Rail 5 does. Rail 6 can do things like checking for files are being appended to, not just written to. It checks for new ways of accessing directories, that sort of thing. So policy is going to look slightly different on Rail 6 than it is on Rail 5. On Rail 6, there's a whole load of macros as well for writing custom policy. So I've written policies, pretty complex ones, in just a few lines of macros for Rail 6. Pretty simple stuff. Again, documentation is the place to go to here, because I can't remember them all off the top of my head. The documentation here is pretty good. One point. The commitment to the API and ABI compatibility with major versions applies to SE Linux. If it works on Rail 6.1, it's almost guaranteed to work on Rail 6.5 and in future versions. Okay. So again, I just want to remind people that Selinux is not an intrusion detection tool, okay? And you still might get hacked. I put the slide in twice here deliberately because I just want to cover this point of remote logging, how this is set up and configured. So to do remote logging, use AuditD. Use the tools that are already on there on Rail, already installed, and already working. So one of the lesser known features perhaps of AuditD is that it allows remote logging out of the box. So on the server, to configure remote logging, stick in your port 60, that's it. Off you go on your server. On the client, you can do things like configuring your server address, and it will start forwarding events over to your centralized logging server. Again, this is a topic I could talk about in quite a bit of detail, but I realise I'm pretty short on time here. If you have SE Troubleshoot D enabled, and I think it's off by default on level 6, but I'm not quite sure, it can certainly be turned off. But SE Troubleshoot D will convert log messages into really easy to read messages for administrators to diagnose problems. SE Troubleshoot D can send you email, and again you can see the configuration. It's really simple to do emails from SE Troubleshoot D. Edit the file, email alert recipients, add in your own email address, like jamesreed@redhat.com or james@redhat.com. Please don't send me your email, I don't want to see it. There you go. Your email will look like this. You can see this is a denial from Selinux, and in this email it says, if you want to fix the label, run this command. Okay. You get this automatically in your logs anyway, but if you want your logs forwarded to you via email, this is one option for you. As you can see, this is actually Dan Walsh's screenshot, so send your email to Dan instead, okay? Or send it to your security team. He'll love to read your email, I'm sure. So what about confined users? And this is another thing I just want to talk about. You can confine users with Selinux. Now, by default on Rail, users are unconfined. And this has a few different meanings. But there's a few different roles set up for things like guests and kiosks. This might be really useful if you're running guest machines somewhere in the lobby in your organization. Confine that user with Selinux, restrict them to just using web browsers, restrict them just to voice and that kind of stuff. Selinux has built-in rules for this. Now, confining Selinux is a whole other topic, and again, you see this big topic is Selinux. Go check out the video for one of our principal architects from North America. We've got a pretty good video there on the customer portal. Plenty of information available. So integration with IPA. So you can pull in things like user context from IPA server, those that use the free IPA at the moment, Red Hat IDM. You can set things like the context for all your users. If I show you what this looks like in the screenshot, this is a screenshot of editing a user. So you can set the Selinux context, it pulls it down at login, and Selinux will start confining your users. You can confine users, you can pull the Selinux context down from LDAP as well, but most of you familiar with LDAP realize it doesn't have a user-to-machine mapping. So there's kind of a limitation with integrating with LDAP. It's technically possible. We've got some good articles on our website that explain how to do this. So go check those out, or come to me if you want those sort of links. So nearly on the last slide now. We want to improve Selinux usability. We want people to turn it on by default. We want people to write proper rules and understand the technology that they're using. We've added 700 manual pages for this. There's a lot of documentation out there. It doesn't mean you're learning a new thing, but you'll realize actually it's really not as complex as you think. Go check out the Selinux bootings as well. You'll find there's a lot of options for turning on really common configurations. You don't have to sit there writing policy all day long. So to summarize, Selinux problems fall into one of 4 areas. Labeling problems, your fault. Unexpected or unusual configurations, your fault. We realize actually it's really easy to fix these things, and Selinux is doing its job properly. There are bugs in applications, there are bugs in policy, but nowadays on Rail 6, you shouldn't see many of these pop up. Again, use the customer portal, raise a ticket if you think you found one of these bugs, and you can still be hacked. Okay? Selinux configuration really is quite simple. It's controlled by configuration files, and I'd argue perhaps Selinux configuration is a lot simpler than a lot of system demons out there at the moment. Keep Selinux informed, configure it properly, and you can write custom policy for your apps. So just to finish now on a list of links. So check out the manual pages. It's all by default on Rel. In user share doc Selinux policy, there are lots and lots and lots of pages that you can browse through your web browser that explain a lot of Selinux policy in a lot of detail. You should find that you can find what you're looking for there pretty easily without having to raise any support tickets. You can help yourself. Some good things there, like Dan Walsh's blog. So Dan Walsh is the guy to go to for Selinux in Red Hat. Some really interesting articles on there too. I've referenced quite a few of them throughout the presentation. The security guide is, again, a long, long document that has a lot of information about Selinux implementation on RHEL 6. Writing Selinux for confined users, a Red Hat magazine article. And the last one I can highly recommend is we have Red Hat, we have training available. So there's a 4-day course for writing custom policy if you want to go and learn this kind of stuff. Again, don't be scared off by it. So it's 4 days long, really, really useful. You'll come away learning a whole lot about Selinux, and there's an exam on the last day if exams are your thing and certifications are your thing. Highly recommended. So guys, thank you very much. Thanks for listening.